The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, who has been slowly but surely losing his voice over the last little while, and I am joined, as always, with the wonderful, the knowledgeable DCB DB Cooper himself with plastic surgery, Dr. Captain Austin Burgess. Brother, how the hell are you this fine evening?
I'm doing great. I completely forgot to mention last week that Najib Halaby was the guy that had the DB Cooper connection too, that some people thought he might have been DB Cooper as well.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, forgot to tie that one in. But,
Okay.
you know, we'll tack that onto this one.
All right. Well, that's very interesting. But yes, tonight we are continuing our series, ramping up to our trip out to Colorado to check out SnippyCon. We're going to be talking with some really awesome people. I could not be more excited about my personal interviews. I get to talk with Katie Page, Jay Anderson, and Mark D'Antonio. That is going to be so fun, man.
For sure.
So this portion of the San Luis Valley exploration, we're going to be getting into, well, stuff that's a little bit more in our wheelhouse, which is ghosts in the fucking mountains.
Exactly. They might be in a valley, but they're surrounded by some pretty damn big mountains.
Yeah, well, in the mountains, right? It's like a bowl.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as on brand as we can get.
Yeah. All right, dude, let's dive right in. Where does this shit start getting spooky?
All right, so before we really dive into the haunted stuff here, I did mention the end of last week here that we ran out of time to cover the NORAD event. So I did want to start with that one today before we really get into the haunted stuff. And O'Brien calls it the NORAD event. It's kind of really a collection of a 6-week stretch of events that led up to one particular incident in the valley. And it occurred between November 1993 into mid-January of 1994. And during that window, he documented 7 separate fireballs, all different colors, greens, blues, whites, oranges, plus 2 orange orbs, 2 other unexplained fireballs, mysterious booms, a wave of Bigfoot reports, another documented cattle death, and reports of military activity tagging along behind all of this going on. But the whole thing kind of comes to a head on one specific afternoon on January 12th of 1994. And this occurred at 2:55 p.m. that day. A NORAD satellite operator, which is, we mentioned back in the Denver airport episode, NORAD is stationed inside the Cheyenne Mountain area near Colorado Springs, which is like the actual NORAD command center that exists for the entire country. But anyways, this NORAD satellite operator logged what he called a significant explosion out near Greeny Mountain and Rock Creek Canyon on the western side of the San Luis Valley. And 45 minutes later, a NORAD official picked up the phone and called the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office directly, telling them to exhaust every effort to find the source of that heat signature or explosion. Now, a guy named Ron Rager, who helped develop the exact satellite system to detect this, confirmed to O'Brien and later on Fox's sightings program that he personally saw the detection data himself. And his read on it was the data was genuinely strange because it didn't match up with any sort of conventional explanation on what could have caused that. So search and rescue gets dispatched along with a private plane. And then oddly, a FEMA supervisor overseeing the satellite operator called back and redirected everyone to a completely different set of coordinates 25 miles away from the original spot and called that new site the probable impact site. And they searched that area instead, but found nothing because it wasn't the site that was initially reported. Now, 2 hours later at 4:55 p.m., a retired Air Force officer named Jimmy Lloyd, 30 years as a fighter pilot, a self-described skeptic about all this kind of UFO type stuff. He was near Florence, Colorado, when he witnessed a battleship-sized group of 6 or 7 green glowing objects, moving in a tight crescent formation, streak by streak, but completely silent. And it looked from the direction they were headed to be going down into the valley. And when he got home, he actually plotted the trajectory of these objects himself, and it matched the exact coordinates that NORAD had given the sheriff that same afternoon for the initial unexplained explosion. Now, here's where O'Brien does something I kind of really respect on this, because he didn't just report it and moved on. He pointed out this whole sequence of events is almost a carbon copy of something that happened exactly 11 years earlier to that day near Gallup, New Mexico. And on January 12th, 1983, the contemporary newspapers reported a suspected meteor strike, sonic booms across multiple towns, and a shallow crater with 0 wreckage in it. And again, it was this sort of green fireball that had been reported for the locals that had seen whatever it was in the sky. And an FAA spokesman who told a reporter about it, they said it was some sort of classified military aircraft. Then the next day, officially denied ever saying anything like that. Heavy military helicopter traffic showed up to the area for days afterwards, and there were these unconfirmed rumors, never verified, of some sort of crash retrieval near the Chaco Canyon that was quietly moved down to Kirtland Air Force Base. So, little interesting, kind of gets into the crash retrieval element there. But one more detail from the Gallup case that really kind of bleeds into the NORAD incident was that the reporter who covered the story for the Durango Herald died in a mountaineering accident shortly after his articles ran. That's all we know on that. So maybe coincidental timing, but a lot of people kind of viewed that as a way to potentially silence the truth of what those articles were going to be getting at. But now that part of that story kind of bleeds into the NORAD story's most unsettling element here, and it sort of mirrors a detail that I just described from the Gallup incident, because in March of 1994, a source told O'Brien that a NORAD captain who had been newly promoted in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy was found dead in her garage of carbon monoxide poisoning about 2 weeks after that call went out to the sheriff's office that was almost immediately redacted. Supposedly there was a suicide note, but no death notice ran in any local paper. And O'Brien tried to kind of run this down, but in his own words, he hit a brick wall on it and couldn't confirm any of it. But then, over a year later, at a separate UFO conference, a man introduced himself to O'Brien as a NORAD employee, and O'Brien mentioned the rumor about the captain, and the guy just said, 1 death? Oh, there were 3.
All right.
So, yeah. That's it. That's all O'Brien ever really got. No names, no details, no additional confirmation there. But there is one last piece that kind of adds to the suspiciousness of this whole story, is there's a production company called Very Directions. It was this like legitimately credentialed outfit that was going to make a PBS documentary about a Trident submarine, and it worked with NASA on a story about the space race. So it's been, like kind of these legitimate scientific documentary type deals. Well, Ted Turner's TNT network hired them to make a UFO documentary, and initially NORAD agreed to let them film inside the Cheyenne Mountain location, but the moment it became clear that they specifically wanted to cover that exact NORAD event that O'Brien has kind of made famous, NORAD and the Cheyenne Mountain complex pulled all their permissions, no explanation given. So maybe this isn't like a traditional haunted event, but I think it works as an example of how these UFO events could kind of cross into darker territory when you start having people that maybe dive a little deeper, maybe learn more than they should know, start disappearing. And I think that gets into really one of the scarier aspects and elements of the whole UFO topic in general.
Oh, God, yeah.
But moving on from that, I do think that one's a pretty notable one just because it involves not only an unexplained phenomenon, event, anything like that, it also ties into some of the just conspiratorial aspects of government or military involvement and how people that potentially know too much can sometimes just get taken out.
Well, we've heard stories.
Wouldn't be the first time.
No.
So, yeah, I do think that one's just a good example of the darker side of ufology, if you will. But now to get into the actual haunted stories and locations in the valley. I'm going to start off with one that's kind of got the biggest paper trail behind it.
See, there was this lady and she had goat hooves and she tried to crawl in the back of somebody's car.
I could go on to that one, but I think that's already, pretty well documented.
Well documented.
So this one is actually known as the House on River Road. And this actually used to be a house. I think it still kind of exists there, the remnants of it at least. But there used to be this house on North River Road in Alamosa that was right along the Rio Grande, basically near the Cattails Golf Course, and existed on 160 acres with stables still standing from back when the property was reportedly a stop along the Old Pony Express route, which existed between Denver and Santa Fe. Kind of a nice little stop along the way.
Yeah.
But the house itself actually burned to the ground in 1993. So maybe I was wrong. I thought there's still some sort of remnants of the structure you could see, but maybe I'm completely wrong on that one. But before it burned, O'Brien tracked down an actual newspaper article about it, and it was published appropriately on Halloween, October 31st of 1983, in the Valley Courier. And it was written by 2 Alamosa high school students. It was reprinted from their own school newspaper. But it wasn't just like a campfire talk like you would kind of assume some story that's reprinted from a high school newspaper would be. The students had gone through microfilm at Adams State College and the Alamosa County Courthouse and found what was the record of every single family that owned the house from the time that it was built in 1872 until 1951. Every single family that lived there during that time period all experienced some sort of violent death within the family. So the students that had gone through all this microfilm at Adams State College and the Alamosa County Courthouse, they found record of every single family that had owned that house from the time it was built in 1872 until 1951. Well, every family during that stretch of time all experienced some sort of violent death to a family member while they were on the property living there at the time. The first owner was a man named Jerry Kent. He killed his wife and then killed himself right after the house was finished.
All right.
The very next owner was a woman named Jenny Craig. She was found hanging from the stairway light fixture in 1915, shortly after. Then in 1934, a family named the King family. Not the same King family as the Snippy owners, but anyways, they lost a son poisoned under circumstances that no one could ever explain while living in that exact house. After that, a woman named Edna Mae Harriman hanged herself from the front room chandelier. Last recorded deaths of the house were another murder-suicide. A man killed his wife and then himself, and when the sheriff arrived, there were still breakfast eggs sitting on the stove and 8 children upstairs.
Good God.
Yeah. So O'Brien didn't really just stop at this historical record. He kind of went on his own hunt for more additional information about this house. And in 1997, in the Valley Courier, he ran an ad asking if anyone had any strange experiences to share. And a woman that he calls Faye called or wrote into him. And she says that her family had lived in the house from 1982 to 1989. And she says flat out that the stains from one of those killings, the man named Munez, the one I just described that had killed his wife and then himself in the 60s with, the same details of the eggs being on the stove still with the children upstairs. She says that man's blood could never be fully scrubbed out of the linoleum. So when they finally moved into the house, that was still a fixture on their floor.
Fuck a bunch of that.
Yeah. They finally said they had to sand the floor down to get this guy's blood out of it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And on top of that, Faye's family had their own experiences on top of all the history this house was already known for. They said that posters would randomly fall off the walls right at the stroke of midnight. They said that this happened on Friday the 13th of all days too, so take that for what you will. She said that her boys would get thrown down the stairs by something unseen 3 separate times. Apparently her son was kind of he was kind of just like a traditional teenager, kind of joking around, didn't really fully believe in some of this. So she says that he jokingly invited whatever it was inside one night as a joke. And after that, his girlfriend's wrist came up bruised as if something had grabbed her, like obviously bruised. A few days after that, I guess he had a pierced ear and his earring got torn completely out of his ear unexplainably one night. I heard O'Brien describe this before on a podcast. He said they were sitting on the couch watching TV when randomly he just felt a pull and had the earring completely ripped out of his ear out of nowhere. That one's pretty unsettling to me because if that is a true story situation, there's not many explainable things that could you could just write that one off with.
He's just lucky he didn't have a Prince Albert.
No joke.
I am so sorry, listeners. I am what I am.
So another element to this house was there was a phone that would get answered by a little boy's voice when no one was home, which Faye would actually connect to the 9-year-old who was reportedly poisoned at the house. It was something that was reported even before she had taken over as the residence. I guess a well-trained horse on the property that she owned refused every single time to go anywhere near the building. They say animals kind of pick up on a vibe, energy, places like that. She said this horse had never had any issues with anything like that. Very well-mannered, but for whatever reason, when she would bring him near the building, it would just slam on the brakes.
Right, yeah.
She even described seeing or watching a black horse-drawn wagon come up the road one night, somebody driving it, but before it just turned around and headed back the opposite direction before it actually reached her house. And on certain nights and certain weather, she said you could hear the stagecoach and the chains arriving, although you would never hear them leave or see anything. So
it's oddly reminiscent of the LaGrange out there by the airport.
It definitely is a little bit. And to me, I think it kind of beckons back to what they're talking about. Like, what was it, the Pony Express, or this place was some stagecoach stop between Denver and Santa Fe back in the day. Yeah. So kind of like a window in time type thing to me is what that kind of reads like.
Probably so.
I guess the door on the house, or I guess it was a door between the living room and the dining room that would not stay shut. Tenants had to put a hasp block on it, and didn't matter. It would still bang open on its own, even though the second room was completely empty. And eventually they just took the door off its hinges because it kept happening no matter what they could do, no matter anything they did about it. And more than once, families would rearrange furniture before bed and wake up to find it all moved back exactly the way it had been before they'd moved anything. But no sounds, nothing like that. So there's also something out on that property worth mentioning, even without a body count attached to it, is the land has old matrimony vines growing on it, which locals took as a sign that a Native American campsite was once there long before any of this. I don't really understand the connection to the vines and the Native American.
I don't know what a matrimony vine is.
I don't really either. So
I would assume it's something like Virginia creeper.
Yeah,
or
something
ivy or some shit.
Something like that. I just don't understand how that directly connects to a Native American campsite. I think it's probably one of those things of like things get spookier if you tell someone it's a Native American campsite.
Yeah,
and that's what I gather on it. But I don't think you need to get this place much spookier than it already is. So there's reports of a hanging tree that was on the grounds, a big Navajo willow tree, and tenants tried more than once to hang just a simple rope swing from it, but the rope kept breaking for no reason. And in either 92 or 93, a 22-year-old attempted suicide from that same tree. But again, like every time he tried to hang a rope swing from it, the rope did in fact break and spare the life of the person who attempted suicide.
That is not a story you hear echoed like the hitchhiker shit.
Yeah.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah, for sure. So O'Brien did track down a separate ex-tenant, someone who had never talked to Faye or never met Faye, and she basically independently described the same thing, the same boy answering the phone, and was eventually told outright by one of her neighbors, he's a ghost. He just answers the phone every now and then. That's something you're going to have to get used to. So even the neighbors were in on everything going on around this house. And when the house finally burned, the incident, I guess, involved some teenagers getting drunk out there with a bottle of whiskey. I guess they went into the house, started a fire in the wood stove for some reason, and the thing got out of control. But rumor has it that the fire department got the call, and they're like, oh, we're going to let this thing go. This thing needs to be put out of its misery.
That seems unlikely to me, but okay.
Yeah, that's the rumor around town.
That's not your job, fire department.
Yeah, you shouldn't be the one making those calls. But
also, if you allow a wood stove fire, I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but don't they have a door on the front that
unless
you keep
they didn't
the fire in?
Yeah, unless they didn't clasp it, it could have. Yeah, something could have sparked out of there, like something popped.
You're right.
Yeah, there's multiple ways that a wood stove fire could have gotten out of control, but the whole fire department being like,
just
let's let that fucker burn.
Yeah. But, we don't need no water.
They did say as it burned, or the people say, neighbors that were around during the time that it caught fire, say that the holes that ate through the roof of the building lined up for a moment into the shape of a giant sinister, smiling face.
Okay, come the fuck on.
I mean, I'm not saying that one's not true, but like there's rational explanations on how that could happen as well.
I mean, to me, it sounds a bit more like a tall tale, but who am I? I wasn't there.
Hey, with all the weird shit about that one, I think the earring story is the one that kind of really gets to me the most because everything else, falls a little bit into the trope category. I've not heard of a ghost ripping someone's earring out before. That one's kind of a new one for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of obviously like physical harm. But
yeah.
That's. Whew.
Yeah. That's one that has a little bit of physical evidence to go along with it.
That's got, and I don't mean like how the kids say cringe, but that is some cringe shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Like cringe is in like,
ow.
Thinking of, how, if you were in that person's shoes.
Oh,
for
God.
Sure.
You're just trying to watch Seinfeld and a ghost rips your earring out. Goddamn.
So this next one is one of Christopher O'Brien's own personal stories directly from his time living in the Baca Grande region of Crestone. So he says he was living in this A-frame house up in the mountains, and over the course of about a year, things started to happen that he didn't really have a clean explanation for. First, he heard footsteps at 3 a.m., like really, really heavy, noticeable footsteps. Footsteps are a bit of the trope territory, but he says this is what sounded like what he thought would be his roommate pacing around in army boots is the only thing that could have caused the loud noise that he described for these footsteps.
Yeah.
So he gets up to check. He hears the footsteps stop right as soon as he reaches the stairs, and he searches the entire upstairs region, but no one's there. And I guess his roommate's still asleep at the time. And his roommate confirmed the next morning that he'd heard these footsteps as well, but hadn't bothered getting up to check on it. So a couple months later, when he's alone at the house with his girlfriend's cat and 2 of their puppies, all 3 animals suddenly just bolted through the house in a total complete panic. And then he heard 7 distinct heavy footsteps come down the stairs, one at a time, each one making the wood groan under what he assumed was real weight. He says he actually saw the stair flex on the last step as it was basically assumed to be stepped onto as this loud footstep noise happened. And he was out on the porch before whatever it was reached the bottom after he saw physically with his own eyes some sort of reaction to the step potentially being stepped on there.
Dude, that has got to, I mean, given that if this is true, that has got to be terrifying.
Yeah, and some of these ones you got to take with a grain of salt, but like, I don't know. Christopher O'Brien's one that I tend to trust his word on, especially one that's his direct personal experience here. Maybe he has spent in a yard to sell the book a little better, but I think he had more to lose by starting to spin tall tales like that for someone in his position.
I agree. And I mean, when all of your career is based on you trying to be as credible as you possibly can.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not helping.
You're not going to throw it all out with some ghost story you want to share. So apparently, later that winter, he woke up to a glowing basketball-sized mass of orange light hovering near the ceiling. And at first he thought this was like a chimney fire reflecting off the snow outside, but no fire, nothing burning. And the light was still there when he came back to check on it from the outside. So at this point, he starts asking around about the house's history. And it turned out in the early 80s, a man, allegedly weighing 300 plus pounds, had died in that house from a heart attack, naked on the upstairs toilet. He'd been wedged so tightly between the toilet and the sink that it took paramedics a considerable amount of time just to wedge him out of the area. And here's the detail that gets me is years later, O'Brien ran into the new owners of that house at some sort of 4th of July festival in the Crestone Baca area. And jokingly, he kind of asked, he's like, "Oh, have you met the ghost yet?" And he said they just kind of looked at each other and their faces went white. And they had just moved in that week and they had really no idea about any of the ghost stories yet, but they said they had just replaced the seat on the upstairs toilet with a brand new one. No one had even used it yet, but the next morning they went upstairs and that brand new seat had already been cracked. So when O'Brien starts telling them about a 300-pound ghost that died in the upstairs bathroom, and they're like, yeah, we just moved in and replaced that seat and it was cracked the next morning.
That's how you die like the king.
Elvis himself. So O'Brien said that he kept tabs on the families that lived there afterward, but none of them stayed long. And from his own words, he's convinced that the 300-pound ghost still lurks about the place, a soul that can't quite bring itself to move on from the way it went out. And I guess if you went out in sort of a tragic, semi-embarrassing fashion like that, I could see how you still have some unfinished business there, if you will.
Dude, unfinished business is a poor choice of words. Austin, how dare you? That is mean.
Well, either way, with this thing being in the Baca, we could definitely swing by and take a look at the residence of the 300-pound ghost if he is still in existence there to this day.
No porcelain shall stay uncracked in this home.
That is his promise.
Indeed. Yeah, I love that. His promise. Not his curse, his promise.
So this one, it does actually take us technically outside of the valley, but it's really only 20 miles east of Crestone, but over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So as the crow flies, pretty short distance, but it does take a little bit to actually drive around there. But there are two little towns that sit basically right on top of each other, Westcliff and Silvercliff, and the cemetery there has a reputation that reaches a lot further than Colorado, actually. So O'Brien puts the Silvercliff Cemetery lights in the same category as the Marfa lights in Texas or the Hornet Spook light in Missouri, and I'd even argue the Brown Mountain lights could be included in this because it's a infamous ghost light phenomenon location. So people have been reported seeing them since the spring of 1956, and according to Ray DeWall, who published the local newspaper in Westcliff, the biggest of these lights are about the size of basketballs. They pulsate, they drift slowly, and then they vanish the second you try to get close. So fairly similar to the Brown Mountain lights, except the story about the guy touching one of those and getting shocked himself.
Yeah.
That was just an odd one.
There's a lot of different ways that people describe the Brown Mountain lights. And, I mean, hell, maybe they did that too, but I've always heard that, like, these things will get right up to you and shock the shit out of you.
Yeah, true. So in 1969, a man named Edward Lehan from the National Geographic Society actually came out to investigate, and he ended up in their August issue that year saying, "I prefer to believe that they are the restless ghost of Colorado. No doubt someday somebody will prove there's nothing at all supernatural in the luminous manifestations of Silvercliff Cemetery, and I will feel a tinge of disappointment." So
Yeah, right.
I thought that's kind of funny because that's basically my outlook and feeling on a lot of these things too. It's like, yeah, maybe someday science will prove that the Brown Mountain lights aren't anything special, but when that day comes, I'm going to be a little disappointed because that takes the fun out of it a little bit.
Right.
So people have tried to debunk this one for a long time. Locals have kind of done the experiment where they turn off every single light in both towns at the same time. This is what I've seen in the report, which sounds really hard to coordinate, but maybe if you have small enough of a town, you could pull it off. But they basically did this just to rule out reflections off the street lights, but the lights kept showing up anyways. And the one that really sinks it's just a reflected light theory is these lights were being reported in the town before electricity was even a thing. So again, kind of similar to the Brown Mountain lights in that regards, more of just the unexplained ghost lights. And even though that one's not technically in the valley, it's close enough as the crow flies to include in there.
Right.
Now, back over the Sangres, back into the valley for this one. And this one's kind of a grab bag because it's mostly centered on this specific stretch of road. And it's actually the same stretch of road where the CSETI trainees claimed to see that 12-foot craft back in Greer's story when he was vectoring in and projecting himself into Mount Blanca. There's a local resident named Jack Cookerly who was driving home into the Baca one fall evening when a brilliant white light blew past him at a high speed off-road where there's completely nothing. No houses, no roads. And he said it looked exactly like the front light from one of those old steam trains. Silent, and it just swept south parallel to the mountains and disappeared. So he basically views that as a ghost train phenomenon, which is kind of an interesting one. Not one I've really ran into or been familiar with.
I've heard of the ghost train thing, but dude, that's a hell of a phenomenon if you see that shit.
Yeah, well, he says it just looks like exactly like one of those old steam trains, just silently moving across the highway, but not following any sort of train track or road or anything like that.
Crazy.
But yeah, on that same stretch of road, and it's really this one stretch of road where it has this like double S-turn section. And again, keep in mind, this is the road that you take to drive into Crestone in the Baca. A guy who's driven that stretch 100 times says that something darted out in front of his car one night, and he wasn't sure if he hit it or not, but he didn't feel or hear anything. But in his rearview mirror, he looked just to see like, what the hell was that? And he says he counted somewhere between 15 and 20 small, semi-transparent creatures about 3 feet long, only partially there, not fully solid. And he referred to these creatures as prairie dragons. Not sure if that's
Prairie Dragons.
Yeah.
That's a cool band name.
I had to Google it just to see if that was something that was like actually a weird animal I wasn't familiar with, but it seems to exist only in the fantasy realm. So
Is Prairie Dragon like the next level of prairie dogging? Like when you got to go to the bathroom?
I'd assume it's like, to me, it's like a prairie dog is, that's a real thing. Like I figure like when a prairie dog evolves, it becomes a prairie dragon.
Yeah, it's like Falcor from the Neverending Story.
Basically. So the same stretch of road, there's another woman that O'Brien interviewed that he calls Sarah. And by her description, or his description of her, she's just this very educated, grounded person, not someone who's like prone to just spinning the yarn on some of this stuff. But she had her own experience on that same stretch of road, that same 50 to 100 foot stretch with the double S curves. And she said this happened on prom night when she was driving to pick her kid up from a school event. And on her way, she noticed 2 large horses in her rear view mirror just running full speed at her car like they were about to literally collide with it. She says they got so close that they probably should have collided, but she could start to see the reflections in the windows before the horses veered off the main road and just went running into the night. And it isn't entirely clear if these were real horses just acting completely irrationally or some kind of phantom apparition, but she chooses to associate them as the latter.
I mean, we've heard of all kind of ghost horses.
We definitely have, which...
Hell, we even heard of one that was a fucking duck.
Well, hell, I mean, she's sitting here. She clearly hasn't seen the feet of these things, so they might have been the same web-foot horses just making their way to the dunes.
Why don't ghosts have feet? What's that all about?
We've talked about that one before. I feel like this seems like a very familiar
San
subject.
Luis Valley is a perfect place for them to not have feet because of the mirage effect.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that one's kind of an interesting one, and maybe it could be explained as just some irrational horses that broke out and are just spooked or something like that. But when it's on this same stretch of road that's had all these other weird incidents, a ghost train, prairie dragons,
prairie dogs,
you can start to see how anything weird that happens along that stretch could be kind of automatically associated to something anomalous.
I don't know how, but I blame Stephen Greer.
He might have been vectoring in the ghost horses that night. Who knows?
He's like, you guys think aliens are crazy? Here's some fucking prairie dragons.
What if when he's doing CE5, he's just creating all these weird tulpas?
That could be the cost, the universal cost.
Yeah.
When you fuck with the elements that you don't understand,
yeah,
these critters get made.
I mean, there might be something to that. All right. So this next one, this is one that I'm pretty excited for because this is one we will definitely have the opportunity to visit.
Let's go.
And this is known as the Ace Inn. And the Ace Inn was a restaurant and lounge, I should say, in Alamosa. And at the time that O'Brien wrote about it, it was owned by his local postmaster down in Crestone, a guy named Monty Collins, and his wife Peg. But the building actually started out back in the 1930s as this small 1-bedroom house, and it was owned by, allegedly, a woman who previously ran a brothel in Texas.
Allegedly.
And her husband was a bare-knuckle boxer. That's what it sounds like.
What the fuck?
Yeah. You go out there, no gloves, and just beat the shit out of each other.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was a man known as George, and O'Brien kind of made a note that, I don't know if you're familiar with the boxer Jack Dempsey. He's kind of like an infamous
name.
I've
heard that name.
Yeah. He actually grew up in the San Luis Valley. So when O'Brien's hearing the story, he's like, I wonder if there's any connection to Jack Dempsey and this other boxer. I think that's just a random coincidence. I couldn't really find any other potential connection going on there. But reportedly, George and other fighters used to hold matches right there on the Ace Inn property, Fight Club style, like even taking the brawls outside sometimes into the street. So
it was a wild time.
Yeah. That was a bygone era, literally the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
So he died in the mid 1970s, not from a boxing incident that I could tell, but his wife passed away in a nursing home decades later after that. But over the 4 years the Collinses owned the place, roughly 10 different employees, every single one of them being a female, reported feeling some sort of presence and seeing shadows, hearing noises, and often hearing their own names called.
Never heard of that.
Never. Not at Lake Lure at all. To me, that just echoes what's going on in the basement at Lake Lure, to be completely honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you hear that everywhere.
Yeah. So O'Brien tracked down a bartender named Sheila directly, who described a coal bucket getting thrown clean off the lounge's fireplace. No wind, no fan, nothing else to be able to explain why something like this could have happened. No one else was even in the building that night. So that also kind of adds to making this unexplainable event even harder to believe for some people when she's the only one here to be able to share this experience. But either way, you have all this history that kind of starts to add up when you have multiple employees experiencing just weird shit there, and they kind of start to corroborate with each other's stories.
I mean, depending on what the coal bucket's made out of, I'm fairly certain those things are heavy as shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something you could just...
A stiff breeze ain't gonna...
Yeah, exactly. So Peg, the owner's wife herself, felt a shadow pass her, and she described the feeling as like being blown by a gust of air, but being able to visibly see some sort of shadow figure after you feel this physical experience kind of makes that even creepier.
Yeah.
Another bartender there, Teresa, was locking up one night, and then she basically went to turn back to lock the other two doors when those two doors slammed shut, locking her behind there on her own, locked in this little like area that she wasn't able to get out of. So she starts yelling for the kitchen staff to come let her out. And luckily there was a second bartender there who was able to hear her and be able to go and basically let her out that night. So that's kind of a weird one when you have doors not only physically slamming, but locking behind you and trapping you in this area.
Fuck that.
Yeah. So very, very fortunate that another person was there, because she might have been locked up with a ghost that night. A barehanded boxing ghost, if you will.
Just like me, if I had had an even more unfortunate circumstance happen at the Grove Park Inn earlier.
They might have just comped a room for you. Who knows?
Now that I would take.
Yeah. That's probably the very last resort. They'd have been like, we'll call you an Uber.
Where are you going to go? It's like, it's a fucking hotel.
So yeah, other bartenders were interviewed. Pretty much the stories kind of line up to the same thing. Shadows passing by, turning around, no one there, name being called, your exact name being called. But a lot of it was really interesting because the men that worked there, never experienced any of this. It was always the female employees, never a male. So
more cones in the eyes.
Maybe so.
I don't know.
Maybe so. Or maybe you just have this weird perverted ghost that only wants to try to communicate with females. Who
that
knows?
actually tracks more.
So Monty's own theory, when O'Brien asked him straight up about what he thought was going on, is that he thought it was still George, the bare knuckle boxer, still hanging around his old restaurant, which is kind of an interesting take on that. I don't think there was anything that really corroborated that or pointed to the ghost being of the fighting boxing sort. But I think because George was such a well-known figure in the community and kind of just makes for a good story with something like that. I think it's something, a really relevant piece of history to tie into a place that's experiencing as weird of activity as this is.
Sure.
So here's this detail that Monty almost mentioned as an afterthought, which I think is kind of wild, is when the Collinses first bought the place, there was this old picture frame in the lounge, and it was just like this picture of like a card game happening, but it was sealed behind this glass. So Monty took it off, and tucked behind the frame on the shelf was an actual human skull that was supposedly just hidden, strategically placed behind this photo or this painting. So not sure what that was about, but he described it as old, browned with age, and no one knew how long it had been sitting there or whether it had anything to do with George or any of the hauntings going on in the building. But Monty figured it was worth mentioning just in case.
I mean, dude, human skulls were like floating around back in the day. You know what I'm saying? It's
kind of like paperweights or something, like collector's items.
I mean, it's way rarer to find them now, but back in the day, it's just like, it's like that guy that they taxidermied and they paraded his ass around.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day.
Uh-huh.
People didn't realize that was just an actual fucking dead guy.
You're talking about like the mummy guy here in Asheville? Or you?
Yeah, well, it's like there was like a situation that was like kind of like that, but I thought that this had happened out in Colorado or something like that. And they put him up in a shop and people didn't realize that he was a guy. He was not a prop. He was a human.
Oh, man, I need to look more into this one.
Dude, I swear to God, we talked about it on the podcast, but it's been like a year.
Okay.
We cover a lot of shit.
Yeah, this sounds familiar, but
yeah.
Anyways, I did some digging into this one because, the original Ace Inn, it seems like a location that a lot of locals remember fondly. Especially from what I found, there's like you find these social media posts that's like, here's a photo of what Alamosa looked like in the early 1900s, and it's got the Ace Inn there, and it's black and white photo, and you get all these people going in and commenting like, oh, I remember going to the Ace Inn and talking about a lot of things. They talk about the wild nights that were had there. They talk about the colorful staff. They mention a couple, Vi and George. So George checks out. He's noted for being a local boxer. Can't find anything about Vi potentially running a brothel prior to her experience with the Ace Inn. A lot of locals seem to describe her as just this outward and really memorable personality. So I'm going to say it doesn't seem entirely out of the question that she might have had some extracurricular activities before moving to the Valley and taking up residence there at the Ace Inn.
Sure.
Who knows? But either way, it seems like there's a lot going on there. When I was living in the Valley, the Ace Inn was actually a Mexican restaurant known as, actually, I don't know which restaurant it was at the time. I have it in my notes here, but I completely know that's an incorrect name. So
Tia de la Tina Cholula.
It was a Mexican restaurant at the time. Can't remember the name, but today there's actually another Mexican restaurant that has taken over the building, and it's called Nino's, and it's still open. And we will 100% have the opportunity to go eat at what is now, assumably, a haunted Mexican restaurant.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Can't get much more on the nose for what we're looking for than that.
Oh, I'm stoked. You've been talking up the Mexican food out there, dude.
The Mexican food out there is on par. Like it's, you get a lot of Tex-Mex around here, and I'm not shitting on that. That's
sure.
Just a different style, a different flavor than you get out there. It's a little bit more traditional, a little more authentic. You get like green chili is one of like the main ingredients they use in everything. It just has such a distinct Southwest flavor I can't hype it up enough.
Sign me up.
So from what I understand, staff from even today with the current Mexican restaurant there have reported lights turning on and off on their own. They've reported an apparition of a cowboy, which is kind of an interesting take on this because I hadn't heard that tied to the story before. And again, they just say a ghostly presence that brushes past them in the hallways, which that kind of checks out with everything else. You have mediums and paranormal investigators that have been called to this building on several different occasions to try to either investigate or put an end to this activity, but to no avail. And again, I think that new cowboy detail is kind of an interesting one since I always heard the ghost associated as being this bare knuckle boxer. But, maybe there's more than one spirit here. Gonna have to check for ourselves on that one, I guess.
Cowboys died all the time. It was a dangerous ass job.
Yeah. And I mean, you're literally in the wild, wild west. So I'd imagine a place that was the Ace Inn, literally a place where you could go and stay, take up some residence for the night, get some lodging, would probably be a place that had a lot of cowboys pass through back in the day.
Oh, hell yeah.
But, like I said, I personally love Mexican food and will definitely be eating my fair share while in the Valley. So we will 100% have to make a stop by Nino's for either a lunch or a dinner. And maybe we could see if we have a chance to maybe chat with any of the staff that see if they maybe have experienced anything or maybe have something to share with us. Or if not, we'll just completely cut this part out and go from there.
Well, as long as the TSA doesn't think that an electromagnetic field detector isn't a fucking bomb detonator, I'll bring one.
Hey, I could bring it out early for you just
That's
in
true.
case.
Oh yeah. You're driving shit out.
Yep. So I'm really excited. We looked at a lot of just kind of the haunted locations that Christopher O'Brien covered in his books, just because those are the ones that are super familiar for me. I know there's a lot more out there in the Valley, but I like to say that Christopher O'Brien's kind of the Joshua P. Warren of the Valley. So
hell yeah.
He kind of carved the path for a lot of the future investigators in the area. So I wanted to start off with those because I do think it's a good overview, and it provides some ones that are going to be right there in Crestone that not going to be knocking on anybody's door to go check out their haunted toilet ghost, but I'm at least open to driving by the A-frame house where this thing supposedly resides.
We'll take the same toilet paper that we took to the lodge at Lake Lure, and we'll bring them a roll too.
But I'm also really excited to visit Nino's, the old Ace Inn, and see if we see anything weird. And if nothing else, just chat with the staff to see if they have any experiences they'd be willing to share with us.
Hell yeah, brother. All right, dude. Is that the end of the road for the ghosts?
I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it there.
We got to, because dude, we got a busy ass week ahead of us.
Yeah. See you in the valley, brother.
See you in another valley, brother. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for hanging in there. You know, it's been 2 big, long episodes about some shit that's really crazy with Colorado. Austin and I are headed into the depths of SnippyCon, into the depths of all of the high strangeness in the San Luis Valley. By the time you're hearing this, we will already be there, but we just want to thank you all so much for hanging in there, checking out what we're doing. I know that we have some listeners out there in Colorado, and we hope that we have shown you some things that maybe you didn't know about that are, you know, maybe very close to you, maybe a couple of hours from where you are. But Austin, this is going to be the biggest adventure that we have ever embarked on yet with Ghosts in the Mountains, man. I could not be more excited.
I'm so ready. I'm so excited for this. I've been looking forward to this all year, honestly, and it feels like it's just kind of, I won't say it snuck up on me, but the time is here.
Oh, it snuck up on me, man.
Fair.
But dude, we were destined to do this.
I agree.
It was always meant to be.
To be in Colorado at the same time.
And to phase shift into Mount Blanca from the same spot Dr. Stephen Greer did. It's going to be a wild time.
We'll be sure to get this on video for at least the subscribers there.
Oh, hell yes. And that in mind, if you want to become a Patreon subscriber or paid Patreon subscriber, you have access to the Midnight Broadcast podcast. That's our after show and all kinds of other goodies. And maybe even a really interesting one from somebody that lives in Colorado that's going to tell us about some interesting shit they've experienced out there. Maybe I'm lying to you, but thank you so much for being a listener of Ghosts in the Mountains, and we'll catch you next week. As always, good night and stay spooky, everybody. Dear God, I have no energy, Austin. I'm dying. Oh, wait. Hey, who the fuck is that? Oh, my God.
Shit.
It's John Nyberger from Hitchhiker the Band. All the way from Colorado. You know,
he phase shifted here to join us.
He phase shifted here. You know, I feel like we got to put him on the Midnight Broadcast. All right. Catch you guys next week. Apparently, John Nyberger is going to be on the Midnight Broadcast. Well, if you want to hear that interview and more, go to patreon.com/I think Ghosts in the Mountains. That might be the link. I don't know. Either way. All right. Good night, everybody. Love ya.